Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So Phantom Nightmare is officially here. Hopefully you guys all did well at your sneak peeks and everything. I ended up doing pretty well. I eventually got my hands on 2 Poplars, and somehow I did manage to go undefeated, and I won the sneak peek mat as well. I was playing Fire Kings without running Poplars or Promethean Princess. Somehow I managed to pull it off. But yeah, Phantom Nightmare is definitely a really game-changing set, bringing us obviously the Snake Eye cards, but there's some other really notable cards in the set as well, and those things are causing a ton of price shifts all over the market, which we're gonna talk about today. Let's get started. So kicking things off, we're looking at 1-for-1. 1-for-1 is a card that is currently being run as a tech option in Snake Eye Fire King, and it is pretty useful. It lets you send a monster from your hand to the graveyard in order to special summon a level 1 monster from your deck. Now theoretically, you're dumping an unneeded hand trap or an extra monster that you can't summon in order to get access to Poplar, Ponix, or one of the Snake Eye monsters, and it's just another way to get your combos going if the monster that you do burn your normal summon on gets hit with something like an infinite impermanence. Of course, this card is very vulnerable to something like Ash Blossom, but generally it's worth the risk if it's going to give you a chance to play the game in the first place. The version we're looking at here is primarily the Collector's Rare, which is the max rarity version of the card. The printing was down between $45 and $50 for the longest time, but as you guys can see on the graph here, it's done nothing but trend up, and when we look at the last couple of sales, we see that the card has shot up to just under the $100 mark as more and more players are jumping on the card. I know that buying into max rarity generic cards like this can be risky, especially with Rarity Collection 2 right around the corner, and the very dangerous precedent set by Rarity Collection 1, and as you can see, that has affected sales as the card hasn't moved as frequently as you would expect, but it's been quite a long time since 1-for-1 has seen any sort of meta play, and a lot of players are nostalgic for the card and choosing to jump on it now. Aside from that though, 1-for-1 has several other nice printings, including a couple of different Ultras and a Duelist Tin Super Rare, and all of those versions are going to cost you around $5 to $10 depending on what printing you're looking at. If you are on a budget though, you can still grab one of the many common printings for 25 cents, since the card was also available in Amazing Defenders as just a super, and the card is currently limited anyways. The next card we have is Magic Deflector, a normal trap card with a pretty simple effect. This card negates the effects of all non-normal spell cards on the field for the rest of the turn. So a few months ago, this card is something that did see play against Rescue Ace, as it was able to shut off key cards like Rescue, Alert, and Emergency, and it was also a decent option against Pearly as well. The card fell off for a little bit, but is starting to pick up steam once again. I know Yassine did talk about this card in his video going over Triple Tactics thrust targets, and this card he mentions is useful against Snake Eye Fire King for shutting down cards like Wanted, Sanctuary, and Island. Price-wise, this card actually only has 2 printings despite being quite an old card. Its one holo printing is as a super rare from OTS Tournament Pack 3 back in 2016, so quite a few years old by now. As you can see here, the card has dipped down to about $6 as of a couple weeks ago, but it's quickly climbed back up over the last little while, and right now the cheapest ones you can get on TCG Player are about $12 to $13. As for the viability of this card, I don't know if it's the best possible option. Like, yes, you can shut off those certain things, but I feel like against Snake Eye Fire King, if they have cards like Bonfire and Ash already in hand, they can still play and kill you through this anyways, and so it makes me wonder if a better tech option like Different Dimension Ground is just a better card overall. Anyways, this card does have a common printing as well from back in Abyss Rising. Those copies are only $1 or so, so it's a decent card to try and dig out of bulk, and the commons are fine to hold on to while you decide whether or not you actually want to use the card. Up next, we have one of my favorite cards in the game. It's the Unchained Soul Lord of Yama. This is actually one of the cards that I went out of my way to bling out and pick up a set of in quarter century printing. I just wish that Shavara was back to 3. But anyways, Yama is a Link 2 monster that requires Fiends to make. Now on summon, it adds an Unchained monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand, and while it's in the graveyard, if a card you control is destroyed, you can banish this card from your graveyard and special summon any Fiend from there, and then you have the option to destroy one of your own cards as well. This card is currently being used as a tech option in both Yubel and Labyrinth. Both decks are able to run several Fiends and get this card out pretty easily, and you need a pretty concise engine consisting of just Shavara and Escape in the main deck, and it adds a lot of resilience to your end board. So obviously Yama is down in price overall from when Shavara was hit to 1, but the ultra rare version of the card is starting to trend back up now that it's seeing more play. We're just looking at the 1 month graph here, but you guys can see the card had settled down to around $5 each, but it's shot up over the last couple of weeks, and right now the cheapest ones available on TCG Player are at about the $10 mark. Yama shouldn't be reprinted until the 2024 tins, and I don't believe that the card is expensive enough to justify it needing to be reprinted early or anything like that. This is a card to keep an eye on though, since even though it isn't necessarily like part of the best deck right now, it definitely will be meta relevant, and it could be even more so if we do see hits to Snake Eye Fire King on the next ban list. Yubel gets even more support next set, so the Unchained cards, specifically Yama, are probably something that you'll want to get now if you're interested in trying them out. Another trap card here, we have Solemn Scolding. This is one of the Solemn cards being another counter trap. It's basically able to negate anything, so any monster being summoned and any monster, spell, or trap. However, it's a bit restrictive since it does have to be the only set card that you control in order for you to activate it, and you do have to pay 3,000 life points in order to do so. So I don't really have fond memories of this card personally. I remember I was trying to play it in like Dark World or something. I completely forgot that I'd already set one, and then I drew another. I ended up setting both copies on my side of the field and I couldn't activate either of them. So yeah, not a great time. Anyways, over in the OCG, some players are looking at siding Solemn Strike or Solemn Judgment as a way to deal with Snake Eye Ash. Obviously, Strike is better for hitting hand traps and the effects of certain monsters, but Judgment can also be really useful against would-be board breakers like Evenly Matched. Scolding attempts to be the best of both worlds, being able to negate either of those scenarios, and typically you don't have to worry about setting too many cards when you end your turn in Snake Eye Fire King. Scolding has just 2 printings and both of them are secret rare. This card was in New Challengers and then it was also in the tins that followed, so both printings are like 8 or 9 years old by now. This is a card that players have tried to hype up at a few different times over the years, but it's never really seen too much competitive success. For the most part, either version of the card has sat at around $2 to $3. It's just recently that both printings have spiked, and right now either version is going to cost you between 8 and 10. Personally, I'm not looking forward to playing this card again. It's obviously not good going into time and it can't be set with something like Imperm. On top of that, Iron Thunder is a really good counter trap that came out in Phantom Nightmare, and I feel like it's a really scary card that players are going to try teching in as well. Try Scolding if you want. Personally, I would stay away from it. I'm also expecting a bunch of the Solemns, including this card, to finally get a ton of easily accessible reprints in Rarity Collection 2, so I would try to offload this card actively if you can find players that are looking for it. Alright, so this is a pretty weird one. It's Majesty's Pegasus. Now, it doesn't say it in the name, but this is the field spell for the Magispector archetype. It lets you tribute a wind spellcaster on your side of the field to summon a level 4 or lower Magispector from your deck. Magispectors are a pretty old archetype by now. Basically, they all try to go +1 on summon, and they search for a ton of small disruptions. Now, back then when they first came out, you could just pendulum summon them all out of your extra deck every single turn, and this card was great for turboing through them to load up your extra deck, but the pendulum mechanic is obviously a lot different now. But we did get some pretty cool Magispector support in Phantom Nightmare, and although key cards like Mbuku were reprinted in Maze of Millennia, Majesty's Pegasus wasn't in there. Looking at the graph here, we see that the price of Majesty's Pegasus was quite high about 3 months ago, probably around the time that the Magispector support was first revealed over in the OCG. However, the deck hasn't performed over there, and obviously some of the hype died down, so we saw the card at around $5 to $6 for a little bit. Now, however, that the cards are officially here, they're trending back up again. At the time I'm recording this, there's only 2 listings available on TCG Player for Majesty's Pegasus at $20 and $25 per copy, with a couple of listings actually moving at the $20 mark. Now, if we had gotten the Magispector Link and Porcupine and the new Xyz, back when Magispectors first came out, I would be all over them and I would definitely think that they're top tier. However, we are in 2024 and the cards just really don't do enough. I feel like they're not bad, I just don't see them competing with other cards in the current format. Majesty's Pegasus is also just too slow and doesn't do enough, unfortunately. I feel like I wouldn't even run it in a Magispector deck if I were trying to build it now, and really I feel like it's just spiking because it only has the 1 printing. Definitely a card to look to offload as soon as you can, since it will likely get a reprint in an upcoming reprint set. The next card we have is Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon. This card is a rank 5 monster that you probably aren't summoning with 3 level 5 monsters. This card can't be destroyed by card effects, and you can also detach a material from it to have it gain the attack of all other monsters on the field, and if it has a Dark Xyz monster as material, you also get to negate the effects of all other face-up monsters on the field, but then you can only attack with this card. So I believe that the deck that's possibly using this is the Goblin Riders. My friend mentioned this to me where they make Raiders Night and then they put this card on top of it. As soon as I do get the list, I'll make sure that I show it to you guys. Goblin Riders didn't manage to do anything in the OCG, but I think that Max C is a big contributing factor there, and the deck might be a bit stronger here in the TCG. This is a card that's never really been meta relevant, and so it's just the original secret rare printing from Phantom Rage that we care about. The card has historically sat at about $2 to $3, a pretty common range for secret rares from core sets that never see any play, but with the very small attention it's getting, we see it's moved up to around the $5 mark. However, the card did get a super rare printing in one of the tins, which should be like a 25-cent card. I haven't had much of a chance to look into the Goblin Riders yet, but given that they have 2 secret rare slots and Voiceless Voice only has 1, I think that maybe Konami thinks that they're going to be viable this format. A card like this, along with the rest of the engines that could see play in the Goblin Riders, might be worth picking up bit by bit, just in case they do pop up. There is one other card I want to mention briefly. It's Mozarta the Melodious Maestra. So we're talking about Mozarta, but a lot of what I'm going to say is going to apply to several Melodious cards. In Legacy of Destruction, there's new support for the Melodious archetype, and I guess the deck isn't bad. The support looked okay. It's actually caught a lot of the community off guard and is performing better than expected to where it's almost like a rogue deck, but it can win games if you aren't prepared to play against it. The thing about a bunch of the Melodious cards is that they were never printed in high rarities. They were mostly commons and rares, and then for a bunch of cards, the highest rarity printing came in like different star packs. Now that said, a bunch of these cards are randomly trending upwards. Mozarta here is a big monster that's an extender. I assume there's a way to cheat it out of the deck, but once it's on the field, you can special summon a light fairy from your hand, but then you're locked into light monsters for the rest of the turn. With this one, we see that the star foils are at $3 to $5, and then we have the commons and rares at $1 or $2 as well, depending on the printing. I don't think the deck is going to end up being anything too special or worthwhile, but it is worth noting that they have potential, and with support coming in the next core set, there are going to be players that are going to look to put together the strategy and might want to pick these up sooner rather than later. It might be a good idea to set these aside when you're rummaging through your bulk. Alright guys, that is all we have for today's episode. Some pretty interesting techs here. I'm sure that we'll see more as players now have access to the physical cards and can experiment with what works for them and such at your locals. We do have YCS Las Vegas coming up at the end of the month as well, which is really going to get everyone in the mood to prepare and be ready. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.